going on in free agency, and we'll talk a little bit about the Minnesota Timberwolves. And we're joined now by Brian Windhorst, who covers the NBA for ESPN across multiple platforms. You can catch him on the Jump NBA Countdown and Pardon the Interruption regularly. Brian, Steven Strom here of TalkNorth.com. I can't thank you enough for giving me the time today. How's everything?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
So let's get into it here. For a while, it's been about forming a big three in the NBA, starting with Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce, to the big three in Miami, where you covered Wade, Bosh, and LeBron, and to the Warriors super team of Steph, KD, Klay, and Draymond. We're starting to see the shift now to duos, AD and LeBron, KD and Kyrie, Kawhi and PG. And to me, this shift has made the league more balanced. Brian, in your eyes, with this upcoming 2019 season coming up, is this one of the most up-in-the-air seasons that you've ever seen?
I hope so. I mean, we were already probably headed for a transitional season because the Warriors have, they're suffering from injuries and they're going to be changing. And Kawhi was going to probably leave no matter what, even if he just went to the Clippers and wasn't joined by Paul George. So we were probably looking at having a pretty good chance of having two new teams in the finals, which we haven't really had. I mean, we had LeBron in the finals with different teams and different characters, but LeBron was in the finals, for all those years in a row, and then the Warriors were in the finals for 5 years. So for most people, the finals have always been either LeBron or the Warriors for the last decade plus. So I think it was always going to be a transitional season, and I think that's a good thing for the league. I don't know what TV ratings will do. I mean, some people believe that juggernauts are good because everybody wants to either watch them or watch them get beat, and the fact that it's going to be more evenly balanced may not lead to that, although the NFL is evenly balanced, so that's got the best TV ratings, in the country. But I don't think it's been something that where everybody got together and said, let's end big threes and let's start having, two-headed teams. I just think it sort of fell into place, and it happens to coincide with what's going to be a transitional season in the league. So hopefully that will lead to an exciting season, but you never know.
Yes, I think a lot of people are looking forward to this season. There's been a lot of juice in this off season. Now, in your mind, what free agent from this offseason has the biggest chip on its shoulder going into 2019? Who's got the most to prove here? Is it a guy like DeMarcus Cousins? Is it a guy like Russell Westbrook, just to be able to show people he can play with another superstar and succeed? Give me your thoughts here.
Yeah, that Houston scenario is really going to be one to watch because I really I don't see the match. And the irony about that is that I actually think if Westbrook is out on the court with a regular Houston lineup, it could be terrific for him because I think the one thing that he hasn't had in Oklahoma City is great shooting. And, the idea that you want here is to let him create because he is a good passer. And to let him create with shooting, I think would be terrific. I really honestly think if Westbrook with Eric Gordon and Westbrook with, PJ Tucker and, playing pick and roll with Capella and, there are other shooting specialists that they have, Daniel House, etc. I think that would be a really, intriguing team to watch. The problem is that, Harden is not an off the ball player. I actually think it would be terrific if Harden spread the floor for Westbrook and, could be an outlet valve to receive shots because Harden's a much better shooter. But that's not Harden's game. Harden's, if not the greatest isolation player in NBA history, one of them, and you would never want to take him out of the isolation game. So I just don't see the match. And, I'm cognizant of two things. One, that when Harden and Westbrook started talking to each other about this matchup, which they did before Westbrook asked the Thunder to trade him to Houston, I assume that they discussed these scenarios and that they came up with some sort of understanding about how one was going to play with the other. And if there's anybody going to make sacrifices, I would think that it would be Westbrook because I think Harden's a better player. The problem is that the sacrifices that Westbrook would need to make, which would be, my guess, to play off the ball more, to stretch the floor a little bit more, he's not ideally suited to play. it's Harden who's better suited to make the sacrifices, but he's the better player, so you don't want him making the sacrifices. So I'm cognizant that they at least had a discussion about that, and that whatever they intend to try, they at least got on the same page about it in July. That doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot in November, but at least they would have done it. The other thing is that 2 years ago when they traded for Chris Paul, I also did not think it would work. Mike D'Antoni told everybody that it would, and it ended up being right. They ended up being a great team. Could have easily won the championship that year had, things not gone wrong. And so now D'Antoni has gone back out there and said, I'm going to make this work. My system is going to work, and we're going to have a great offense, and you'll see. And I don't see how it's going to work, but I'm inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt because I didn't last time around. So I think Houston is certainly a fascinating team.
Yeah, I'm on your side with that. I'm not a huge Russell Westbrook guy. I've never been, and to see him basically, is he going to be able to play off the ball? I think that's part of the reason why Chris Paul really, fit in there is because he was able to play off ball. Russell Westbrook not an efficient shooter at all. Let's get into Mike D'Antoni really quickly. You touched up on it. D'Antoni has coached some great point guards in Steve Nash and Chris Paul. Do you think he can help Russell Westbrook maybe slow down his game, work smarter? We see Russell Westbrook. You never can question his effort. But do you think maybe D'Antoni can mold him into a little more in-control point guard?
Well, one of the things that D'Antoni is shown to be great at is finding his players' skill set and setting up the team around him to do it. So in Phoenix, he had this guy in Steve Nash who was this incredible live dribble player who was as good dribbling and moving with the ball as anybody I've ever seen. And so he designed this offense that was really one of the first spread the floor offenses that was up tempo, that took advantage of Steve Nash's ability to move. And they would run these pick and rolls with Stoudemire, where Nash was moving with the pick and roll. They would both move like in tandem, made it impossible to guard. And then when he got a hold of Harden, he would do this isolation offense that set up Harden to completely dominate the league by doing isolation. And you could even argue that even what he did with Jeremy Lin, he put Jeremy Lin in the place to succeed. So when D'Antoni talks about his system, there's some things that have been a through line, but one of the things that I respect about him is that how he's taking advantage of his different players' talents. I think he happens to be a very good coach. Do I think he's a Hall of Fame coach? I don't necessarily think that, but I think he's a very good coach, and I think he's proven that over the test of time. So you look at Westbrook, what is Mike going to look at and see that he can accentuate? One of Westbrook's great skill sets is force. It's his ability to play with force, his ability to use brute strength. That's not something that D'Antoni has had before. He's been more successful with skill and finesse than he has with force. And the thing about Westbrook that is alarming is that his shooting percentage is plummeted last year.
Terrible. Free throw.
Including his free throw percentage. And then naturally, because he didn't want to miss free throws, he stopped going. And I think he took 3.5 or 4 fewer free throws per game last year than he'd averaged the last few years before that, which, when he was over an 80% free throw shooter, which means he's leaving, 4 points a night at least on average out there. And that's a huge difference in a league where scoring differential of 4 points is the difference between being, a 55-win team and a 28-win team. That makes a pretty big damn difference. So, facing all of that sets of challenges, I'm interested to see what he comes up with.
We're here with Brian Windhorst of ESPN. All right, quickly on Mike D'Antoni's ex-point guard now, Chris Paul, 34 years old. I know you've talked about it a billion times here, but he can't be moved. First of all, why can't he be moved until December 15th? Can you explain to the audience really quickly why that is?
Well, he can be traded. There's nothing stopping him from being traded. But just December 15th, one of the issues with this trade happening now is that most teams in the league have made their transactions. And to absorb a player like Chris Paul, which would be a huge, just forget about what fit he would be on your team. The amount of assets that would be required for Chris Paul to be traded as a $38.5 million salary or something like that.
Yeah.
it's a hard thing to do when you've just executed your whole off-season plan. So December 15th, it sort of is a signal. It's sort of the quarter mark of the season, give or take. And also it's when all the free agents who have been signed this summer can be signed. Because remember, there's, 100 or so players who are not eligible to be traded right now when you include the draft picks and all the guys who are signed. So it's not an ideal time to execute a very big trade. So, for that reason and the fact that this contract is difficult to stomach, I think that everyone's come to the conclusion he's going to start the year in Oklahoma City.
Okay, yes, and he is due $38 million this year, $41 the year after, and $44 the year after that. Can you give me three destinations where it would make sense? I know we're hearing a lot about Miami. I think he'd personally fit in well. Maybe in Philly. Maybe take that off-ball role with Ben Simmons and do something along the lines of that. What are your thoughts on some of the destinations for Chris Paul?
Well, I don't know about Miami because I do think Miami wants to be competitive now, but also wants to protect salary cap space for 2021 when there's a next really good free agent market. The Heat made some decisions back in 2016 and 17 that took them out of the free agent market this summer. Now, they still got their way into it by trading for Jimmy Butler, but ideally that's not the way you would go about it. And I think the Heat do not want to make that same mistake. And if they already have Jimmy Butler on their books, for I think $40 million that year. If they add Chris Paul, they have no chance of being competitors. So, I know that that's where he wants to be, but I just don't see that match right now. So the other team that would be interesting would be, I guess, the Knicks. But again, the Knicks are targeting 2021 as well, and they don't want to clog their books. It would probably have to be a team that would not mind having Chris Paul on their books in 2021. So, maybe a non-free agent player. And specifically, you'd want a team that is looking to compete right now. You don't want a team that, is at the beginning of a rebuild cycle. Because Chris Paul, he does have good basketball left in him, I think, because he played some good basketball last season, but I don't know how much of it he has left in him. And so you need a team who's ready to go right now to be interested in him. I think it's going to be hard to trade him, and Chris Paul is going to have to, at some point, maybe examine the reality that he may have to take less money, and I don't blame him if he doesn't want to do that.
I heard you on a few weeks ago with on First Take with Stephen A. and Max that you were not sold on the supporting cast of LeBron, Anthony Davis, and the Lakers. Now, after the signing with Danny Green and Avery Bradley, DeMarcus Cousins, Quinn Cook, has your mind changed at all about this Lakers team?
I think they've done a much better job this season than they did last year. They have the type of players surrounding LeBron now that much better fit LeBron's historic skill set. Specifically, I mean, the Cavs and the Heat did everything they possibly could to get 3-point shooters and defenders to put around him, and the Lakers maneuvers reflected that. Now Danny Green is coming off of a pretty good season. He shot over 40% from 3-point range. It might have been his best 3-point shooting season of his career, and that's exactly the type of player you need, which is why they paid him, pretty handsomely to do it. Not long on a contract, but relatively short. So that was a good signing. I just don't know if they are a championship contender, because while their depth should be better than it was last year, I'm not sure that team can defend at the level that they need to, and I'm not sure that team would make it through a gauntlet of a West. But Anthony Davis is a great fit for LeBron's skill set, and if Anthony Davis has an MVP level season, and LeBron rebounds, I mean, that right there is potent enough to make anything possible. I just don't see them coming out of the gates as a serious championship contender, but I could be wrong. Okay. Last one here for you, Brian. This is a Minnesota-based podcast, so I've had to squeeze this in here. Brian, it's been rough. It's been very rough with these Timberwolves, and I like what I hear from the GM, Rosas. I think that Ryan Saunders is ready for the challenge, but we talk about bad contracts, Brian.
And Andrew Wiggins is one of them. 24 years old, 18 points last year, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, 33% from 3, 69 from the line with 3 years left on his horrid 5-year, $147 million contract. What are your thoughts